is actually a statement from Joseph Smith. And it goes back to this sort of point that I have about feeling good versus doing good. Okay. Joseph Smith said, I love that man better who swears a stream as long as my arm, yet deals justice to his neighbors and mercifully deals his substance to the poor, than the long, smooth-faced hypocrite. Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's episode. My name is Jacob Hansen. I am the host here at Thoughtful Faith, and today joining me is my friend, Ben Pacini. Ben, how are you?
Good to be here. This will be fun.
And did I say that right?
Pacini? You did. You nailed it. Nobody gets the Italian last name right. That was great.
I wanted to make sure of that because Pacini, I wasn't sure if it was Pacini or Pacini. It's Pacini. Good.
No, you got it right. You will not be judged by my ancestors today.
Very cool. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
So my name is Ben Pacini. I was a middle school math teacher in Baltimore City for 6 years. Then I was an administrator in DC for 4. And I've been at BYU, Idaho teaching. I'm a professor there at here in Rexburg. Have been teaching here for about 4 years. I should emphasize, this is only my opinion. I am not speaking for the university or anybody else. I do not represent my employer in any other way. But I've always been really interested in, civility, politics. Like that was my jam growing up. I went into education, but I think that economics and politics have both been real interests of mine. And so I think we were getting into it on Twitter the other day, and you were like, all right, come on the show. And it's like, all right, deal. Let's do it. Come on. That was a good time.
It's always funny. I always tell people, like, if you're just bantering on Twitter, like, I'm sorry, you have a limited character count. Everyone's just trying to own each other. Yeah. And it's like, if you want to have a real conversation, let's have a real conversation.
Well, which, by the way, I think is great. Higher resolution is better than low resolution.
Agreed.
And Twitter is a sickness that has affected all of us. So I think this is great to hash something out.
Well, cool. Well, I think so. We're going to be talking today. I'll actually kind of let you introduce what we're going to be discussing today.
That sounds great. So the question that I think we were talking about in back channels was, can a good Latter-day Saint support Donald Trump for president in 2024? And I have some very strong feelings about the former president. I am not exactly shy about those feelings on social media. And I think it's a really good and healthy thing to hash that out. So yeah, that I think, and by the way, we're going to probably deviate from can to should a little bit. And I think that's okay, because those are two separate questions. Hopefully we get into both of those.
Awesome. And just so everybody knows here, I think it's kind of to represent our positions. I'm not the diehard MAGA Trump train, like for life guy. All right. I just want everyone to know this, while I will be defending sort of or discussing my position of why I personally plan to vote for Donald Trump and why I think that Latter-day Saints should. I was a Ron DeSantis guy. Like I was hoping that he would win the nomination. I liked him much better than Trump. And so I'm not coming at this from sort of a worship standpoint. And I think that there is a real and genuine problem, I think, on sort of both sides, but obviously on the Republican side, with sort of a weird worship that can happen with people. But I want people to know that I recognize any of that I recognize. I'm not part of that. And so I'm coming at this as clear-headed as I can. And my hope here with you, Ben, is that, and obviously I think there'll be a little bit of debating going on. I think what I would like to do is more seek for clarity in this. Why do you think the way that you do? And hopefully you then will want to understand why I think the way that I think, not with the idea that you're going to convince me, and not me trying to convince you per se, but rather to create clarity around why people think differently on this issue. Is that a fair way of?
I think that's a great way to say it. Well, it's funny. Like I dabble in enough psychology that like the best way to convince people is to not try to convince them, and to just like, I don't think that I could convince you. And if I was trying to, the best way that I could is by saying, let me represent why I feel the way I do. And I will let you take or leave it to the extent that you feel like that's appropriate. And as it turns out, that feels good to me, because it's like I'm just representing who I am, and where I stand on this.
Absolutely. And I think that's what we'll both do, and hopefully create some clarity, and people can kind of look at that and decide what they think about the different kind of points of view that we have. So to dig into it, I guess I'll just come sort of and ask you in a sense of curiosity, what makes you feel like you cannot vote? Well, I guess I'll pull back just one step before getting into Trump specifically. And that is, do you view this as a choice between Trump or Biden? Or do you look at this as Trump, Biden, or I go to some third party, or I don't vote at all? What's kind of your take on that as far as the options? Because I have a certain view of that generally.
I think that's a perfect way to introduce the topic, because I think we have to start there, because everything kind of follows from that. And if it really, one of the things that's really interesting is when I talk to friends about why I'm not supporting Trump, 80% of the reasoning that they give me is, but Biden, or but the left. And I go, yeah, I get it. The left. Yeah, no, you're right. And like Biden, yeah, not a big fan. That's not the conversation. The conversation is, but what about Trump? And the way that I see this is, let me put it in simple terms and then how I actually see it. In simple terms, there's a really cool, everybody gets excited about ranked choice voting. Have you heard about ranked choice voting?
Yeah.
I think
it's explain it though for those who don't understand it.
Ranked choice voting is where instead of saying, here are the 5 candidates, pick one, it's here are the 5 candidates, pick all 5. Tell me which one is in order your favorite to least favorite. So you would put 1, 3, 2, 4, 5, whatever. Now, I think ranked choice voting is actually really cool. It's a better system than we currently have, especially for primaries. I think that would be really great. But there's a better system, actually, in my view, than ranked choice voting, and that's called approval voting. Approval voting is where you have all of the names and you say yes or no to each one of them. And then the person that has the most approval overall is the one who wins. I view this as approval voting. And I know that feels like a little bit of a shift, like I'm cheating. People will say, but the dichotomy, you must choose Republican or Democrat. And I go, no, I don't. And here's the real way that I see this. I am really, really not utilitarian on this. The conversation for me is, I am going to have to answer before God for what I do. Can I justify who I write down as my vote? If I can do that, I'm going to sleep well at night. And if I can't, then I won't. And so that is the conversation. Is this the person, if I had 100% accountability for what was going to happen, would I feel comfortable putting my name on it? And the answer is, I can't do that with Donald Trump.
See, it's funny. I think we are immediately getting into what I think is actually the core of the difference. Because I have an entirely different sort of paradigm on it, because I am utilitarian on it. and it is so to kind of just let me see if for you, if a candidate you do not feel like is qualified to be president, or doesn't meet your standard for what you think a president should be, if you can't kind of give that to them, then you will either abstain from voting or vote for someone who you feel like you do believe would be the best candidate for president. Is that kind of the summation?
I have definitely voted third party before. I don't think that I honestly can't remember if I voted for Biden last time, or if I voted for, a write-in for Mitt Romney or something like that. Now I should note, because, well, actually I should let you attack me first and then I'll respond. I'm curious what your take is, because a lot of people get really upset. They say you're throwing away your vote. So and I have thoughts on that.
So for me, it comes down to this. There was a video on it I actually watched once by somebody, and they said, what is more important, to do good or to feel good? Right? Let's say that the opponent was Adolf Hitler, right? It was some horrible person, and I decided, and the other guy was pretty crappy too, but he didn't want to, do those things, right? I want to be careful. I get YouTube on me. But like, that's how you
get banned, Jacob. Come on.
I know, I gotta be careful here. But it's like, if I have my choice between those two individuals, the one guy's really bad, but I recognize that my vote to stop the other person will require me to do that. And though I don't like this, there is a utilitarian argument at some point that you say, it's bad enough that I need to vote for this less than ideal candidate, because to not vote for them is to lead to real harm to real human beings. And so while I may feel good about myself saying I didn't choose either of those wicked options, that doesn't mean much to the people who now are being marched off to cattle cars, right? Like, I had a chance to do something to actually help real people, and I failed to do it because of a sense of what?
I need to feel good.
I need to feel good about my choice, instead of choosing the lesser of two evils, because otherwise the greater of two evils wins, right? And so my political philosophy, which is I think where everybody has to kind of start. I think you have to start with your political philosophy, but then I think you have to go to what is the political system that you're in? Because the nature of the political system that we're in, the rules of the game, are such that we're a two-party system. First past the poll voting, all of that kind of stuff.
Where we are. That's the system we're in.
That's the game we're in here. And I kind of tell people this about politics in general. And I've moved my channel. This is not a political channel, and I'm talking about this subject just so everyone knows. I should make this disclaimer at the beginning. I'm bringing this up because there is a real sort of religious dimension where the church is politically neutral when it comes to candidates and things like that. But we want to, as Latter-day Saints, we still should be talking amongst ourselves, right? To figure out where we want to be, and who we should vote for. So I recognize the game that we're playing as a two-party system. I always say that politics is it's a team sport. And in this team sport, there are two teams, and it's based on coalition building. Okay. You have these two parties, and the party isn't one thing. It's a bunch of different coalition. It's a coalition of people that roughly share a particular set of general objectives. And those two teams are moving the ball down the field in one direction or the other. They're either going in the direction that one team wants to push it, or the other team wants to push it. Okay. And that game, so everyone knows, I don't believe any politician is going to be the great savior that like wins the game. All that you can hope for out of your political party and that team is to move the ball 3, 4, 5 yards up the field over the next however much time, right? Because if you don't, the other team is going to move the ball down the field their direction. And so just to kind of sum this up, I look at politics in this thing of that game. It's real. It has real consequences. And it's very important that that ball move in the right direction, because the consequences can be life and death. And so that's sort of just the paradigm that I bring to my political action, is a recognition that I'm within that sort of system. So
no, I think that's great. Let me start by steel manning you. I think this is a really, really important point. I was in DC. I was on an internship, and there was a guy there who was like, "So, are you a Republican or a Democrat?" And because we were all cowards, we were like, "Well, I'm an independent," or I was like 22-year-old college kid, right? And everybody was like, "Well, I kind of lean this way." He was like, "Stop being cowards. You are either on the left or you are on the right." By the way, and so then after he said that, he said, "Now, are you a Republican or a Democrat?" And most of us raised our hands and said we were Republicans because we're all from Utah. He said, "Great. Now, all of you know that it's the Republicans that are in with the tobacco lobby." And we were all like, "What?" And, a bunch of, young BYU Mormons were like, "I can't believe it." Now, there's an LDS guy who's a Republican. And he was saying this. He was a lobbyist.
Yeah.
He said, "I need you to understand that our system is built on, you get two choices. You pick one of them and you ride with them until the election. And you don't equivocate. You got to choose, and both sides suck, and you got to figure something out. And if you don't like the way that they are driving, then you ask for a turn at the wheel. You say, I need to get in there and I need to direct things a little bit better. And you make yourself known, you push in the way that you need to." I am very big, by the way, just in general, on you can hide from unpleasant truths or you can confront unpleasant truths. And the reality is that I think that that's exactly kind of what you're getting at, which is, look, if you are trying to protect the way that you feel, so that you can feel all good and warm and fuzzy inside, instead of actually making a difference for people, there's actual blood on your hands, and you're trading that in for the fact that it felt warm and fuzzy. to not have to put your name to anything out of a move of cowardice. So hopefully I've done a little bit of justice to kind of.
I think that's very fair.
So let me start by pushing back in two ways. Number one, if that is the case, we are going to continue to have the kind of outcomes that we have now, where we have two septenarians, what is it, octogenarians at this point? I don't know how old they are.
I don't know. Trump's getting pretty close, but Biden definitely is really.
These are not good candidates. And if we want to be serious about creating better candidates, at some point you have to say, no, I'm going to choose C, none of the above, because I want a better system. I was doing two things when I talked about approval voting. One was clearing my conscience, right? But like two was rhetorically, I was trying to say the first question that we should be discussing is how to ensure that we don't get this crappy slate of candidates this next time and the next time and the next time after that. We have been sleepwalking into this election for 4 years. Everyone knew what was coming. We knew who the two incumbents were going to be. And nobody actually went to, and by the way, this is something we can talk about later. It's always interesting to see. And I appreciate what you said. You said, I was a Ron DeSantis guy. I think that's awesome. I was not a Trump guy. One of the more interesting conversations I had was with a friend of mine who said, well, there's only two options. I said, great. Who'd you vote for in the primary? He said, well, I mean, I voted for Trump, but I said, exactly. You people, like no one that I know, MAGA just means that you're willing to say it out loud. That's all it is. Mm-hmm. There are so many people out there who will start with, well, I'm not really a Trump guy. But then when you actually get down to it, they're like, well, I'm secretly super eager for him to be the president.
Well, let me do this, though, because I also want to be careful. I can see where maybe you're coming from, where the candidates are so bad, in your opinion, that you just say, and maybe this, you're kind of saying it's more like a protest vote, where you're saying, look, Republicans, if you guys are going to go this route, I'm not even going to play with you guys. I'm gonna let the Democrats have this victory, because I'm so annoyed with you. And I'm hoping that by stomping my foot like this, that you guys will start to pay attention to earn my vote back. Is that?
Yes. And let me take it one step, but let me get to my second point, because I think that this answers your question. Let me here observe that I think that you spoke artfully and accurately about the need to not worry. You've got to do good, not just feel good. I am going to suggest that your vote on the ballot on election day is 99.99999% feeling good and not doing good. The actual act of voting is mostly about you feeling warm and fuzzy inside. Mathematically, you are not the one making the difference. And none of us are, especially not in the presidential vote.
And there's a side to which that's true, but even if it's 0.1% difference that I made, it's better than zero difference.
I mean, look, that's fine. But if we're going on the basis of you need to do good and not feel good, I assure you my protest vote is probably doing, let me put it this way. Me being on this podcast is going to affect the outcome more than the vote that I have on election day.
Yeah, for sure.
And let me take it.
It may influence other people's votes.
That's right. And I think that is, by the way, I should say this too. Let me say two quick things. Number one, politics ain't the main event. And I think you agree on this, but I just want to state it really, really clearly. When it comes to life, one of the things that I found about the left, and one of the reasons why I don't want to be on the left, is because of this totalizing view of politics. If government is the answer, if society is the problem, then what you find very quickly is we need people to give everything they have to the altar of politics. We need people to sacrifice everything they have to a God that is not very kind, not very just, and will not give you very much in return. It is a very, very bad bargain. And what I have seen in the last 10 years is that has shifted from the left to the right. And now we have people on the right who are making the same demands and saying, no, you need to be all in for Donald Trump. Frankly, I don't want to be all in for anybody but Jesus. Right?
Agreed.
And that my family, my community, they are my main event. It is not about politics. I care about it enough to research. I am involved when I can be. I care more about being a good neighbor to my neighbor than I care about who I vote for. And I think that's actually the right way to go. Now, let me supplement that with, my wife has this funny habit of being right. It's shockingly not always good for my ego. It's probably why we're encouraged to get married. There was recently a sweepstakes in town, and the sweepstakes was if you took a picture in front of a giant Santa or something, you could win a thing. And so I'm being dragged around from place to place, loudly moaning about, I hate this. We're not going to win. This is so stupid. And we keep winning these stupid sweepstakes. And every time my ego takes a hit, I'm like, how do you do this? Well, one day she told me the secret. She said, it's really easy. National sweepstakes, 300 million people, you're not going to win. Rexburg, Idaho sweepstakes, you absolutely are, because there's only like 200 people competing. So you compete in 20 of them and you got a 10% shot of winning. This is all my allegory to local politics. We need fewer people getting angry on the internet about Donald Trump versus Joe Biden, and more people showing up, normal, decent people showing up at the primary.
Agreed. And I think that, and I think that we have lots of points of agreement there. I think if I'm looking for where there's a disagreement, again, I think it comes down to a subjective judgment call that we both are making about the stakes of the game, because and how bad sort of Trump is, because I have my issues with Trump. I also would say, from a policy perspective, he was the best president of my lifetime when it came to policies. Now, we can discuss that in a little more detail here in a minute, but where I'm just again to sort of see the psychology here, the sort of framing of the whole issue, it is, but isn't your protest vote? See, it isn't that it doesn't have any consequences. Do you actually have the intention? If your intention is to, let's say, defeat the left and that agenda that they're pushing, do you actually believe that a protest vote will do more to produce an eventual victory in the game against the left, as it were, than does a vote for Donald Trump? Is that or do you even factor in winning the game against the left? Because I very much look at it, just again from my perspective, is that the left is on the march. They've been essentially winning for my whole life. And I want to do everything I can to stop the movement in that direction, because the stakes are extremely high. And I worry that a protest vote actually allows them to move further up the field, because I literally leave the field. I say, I'm not going to be here to push back with my vote. I'm going to walk off the field, and that now there's less numbers on my side, so they march even further. And I understand you guys on my side need to adopt my strategy. Otherwise, I'm not coming back on the field to help you. And maybe maybe that's a strategy.
Let's be really, really clear. If there are 11 people on the field and I decide to sit out, that's a big problem, and I am hurting my side. If there are 330 million people on the field and I step out, literally no one notices. I'm in the state of Idaho. There is mathematically a 0% chance that I influence this election with my vote.
Yeah, but I think that's sort of a way to escape all of this without dealing with it. What if it was your vote that counted?
I would vote for Joe Biden.
You would vote for Joe Biden.
Now let's be clear about a couple of things here. Let me be clear about a couple of things here. I think Joe Biden has done more to undermine the left, in particular the woke left, than any president in recent memory. Wow. He has lost those battles because of an inability to articulate any kind of, but it's good and it's valid. And like, no one is listening to Joe Biden and going, oh yeah, man, we should have more drag shows. No one is saying this. Joe Biden is the right stream. So if what you care about, I'm going to make the appeal to you.
So real quick, let me see if I understand that. So you're saying that it actually is a benefit to the right to keep Joe Biden in office. You care about, I'm trying to appeal to you. If what you care about is the left losing, I think Joe Biden has done more for the crumbling of the left. I think we have seen, look, I like Pride Week, right? Last little while, a topic about which I have a lot of feelings and a lot of discussion that we could have, interestingly. By the way, just so that I'm clear and I'm not misinterpreted, we can be decent to people. And I also have religious convictions about the importance of family as defined by God. And I feel very comfortable saying both of those things. For those who probably don't know me, okay? It has been fascinating to see the way that Pride has been argued in the last like 6 weeks. Like, it is a completely different ballgame than 5 years ago. But is that Joe Biden, or is that just the left imploding on their own insanity?
I think it's some of both, by the way. I think you're exactly right. I think it's people standing up and saying, no, this is crazy. Let me put it this way. I think Jordan Peterson has done more to bring the left to a halt than Joe Biden and Donald Trump have.
Oh, I agree. I agree with that.
In fact, if anything, I think that you can lose so hard that you win, and you can win so hard that you lose. I think Donald Trump has activated more people on the left than he has. Like, if we had just stepped back and been like, yeah, the left is really being crazy right now,
But
I think there would be a swing back to conservatism that we are not seeing, because people can say Donald Trump's a really bad dude. And everybody goes, yeah, no, that's actually a valid point. So if it were really up to me, I think Joe Biden is a better candidate. He is a better person, which is something we can talk about. Well, and I should
does
say
he have better
too.
Policies? Would you actually say that Joe Biden has better policies than Trump?
I absolutely do. I think we have to define which policies.
Oh, let me do something real quick. I want to bring something up because I'm very interested in this. Okay. So I wanted to talk about, I have a little, I'm going to put this on the screen here. Some of the issues that I think are relevant to Latter-day Saints, especially, and to myself as a Latter-day Saint. Okay. Tone and rhetoric. I'm going to put it up there at the top just to get it out of the way real quick. Okay. From the tone and rhetoric perspective, like, Trump is not the best with his rhetoric. Now, granted, I think Joe Biden is so old and senile at this point, or at least getting really close to that he's not so great on it. But yes, from tone and rhetoric and civility, kind of those things, I will grant that is not the one that Trump wins. However,
okay, valid.
Okay, we go to abortion. Okay, and you have Trump, who has a position that basically says that we need to regulate abortion. It should be handled at the state level. And it's up to each state to figure out kind of what the conditions are under which they'll allow it. He himself, I believe, is behind sort of at least a 12-week and after ban, where Joe Biden is full blown, like, you can't ever tell a woman that she can't abort that baby at any point in the pregnancy.
Right.
Okay. It seems like to me, that one would be a win for Trump.
Okay.
He's better on the abortion issue.
So let me answer the abortion issue. And then if I can, I want to pivot to the larger LDS issue. I think that Donald Trump is as pro-life as he is a believer in 2 Corinthians. I think Donald Trump is adopting a pro-life position because that is what is most politically convenient for him. This is not a man who defends the traditional family because he believes in it. Look at his personal family. Right. Okay. Like, and I don't mean to cast stones. I'm not trying to be like, oh, neener. Like, this is not, Ivanka and Jared. I'm not trying to bring kids into the fight. I'm trying to say his personal statements and beliefs, his very long documented history is not that of a man who believes in family and traditional values.
Now, would you, I would agree with that if we're going to go back to, pre-presidency, right? Pre him running for any office. He was a Democrat, I think, in the past, or supported Democrats in the past. Okay. To say that Donald Trump today is the same guy he was in the year 2000 is just not accurate. He's had some pretty significant shifts in his political beliefs. You might say in his religious beliefs. I don't know. Okay. I'm not making a huge judgment call that way. And I would say that I would agree. I don't want to in any way defend his sexual history. Okay. That's not.
I appreciate that. By the way,
but real quick, but when it comes to, again, when it comes to policy here, remember, I am voting for the president based on the policies that they're going to implement, because that's where the rubber meets the road. That's why I'm hiring them. It's like, I hire my plumber because he's really good at fixing my toilet, not because his sexual past has been just squeaky clean.
Okay.
And so my politicians, I'm looking at them from what are they going to do for myself and our country from a policy perspective, because that's what they're in charge of. My prophet is the one that I'm looking for spiritual guidance. I'm looking to my president to implement policies that matter. Great. And on abortion, if I can grant the rhetoric one, can you grant that he's better on abortion?
I will grant that he appointed phenomenal Supreme Court justices. I think it's great.
I love the people Roe v. Wade.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. And by the way, I think abortion was a blot on our escutcheon. It was a moral horror. So, and by the way, this is worth noting. I have a deep contrarian streak. I don't know why it is. I read this once and I still love it. If you want to feel good, hit the other team's base. It won't do any good. Like nobody's going to change their opinion, but your base is going to love you for it. Yeah. If you actually want to make a difference, then attack your own base and convince your own side. And everyone's going to hate you, but you might actually persuade a couple of people. And I think that's like how I was born. Like I love disagreeing with my friends. I am like slightly to the right of Milton Friedman economically. I am like, I am like, you know, a very socially conservative in an unapologetic way. And that is in part why I want to have this conversation, because it's too easy for people to say, well, you're just a lefty. I assure you I'm not. Right.
No,
like,
I wouldn't do that. That's why I think it's actually interesting to have this conversation with you, because you are a Latter-day Saint who is very libertarian in your leanings, from what I can tell.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
And that is a demographic that is fairly common in the church. And so I you know, as I go through some of these issues, you know, we're looking at, again, from abortion is one that now a lot of libertarians will be more on the pro-abortion side, but you as a Latter-day Saint obviously are not. Now, on the war side, I would look at that and say, all right, he's the only president during my life that didn't start a war. He almost made the Abraham Accords were brought about under his administration.
Yeah,
I mean, these are amazing policy victories. And then during Joe Biden, we have the disaster in Afghanistan. We have a disaster in Ukraine. We have a disaster in Israel. And now it's like the world's on fire. And I'm looking at this going, okay, if I choose, again, from a policy perspective, from an outcomes perspective, I can't look at that and say that Joe Biden wins on the wars front. And for a Christian who's trying to follow the Prince of Peace, okay, Trump may have rough language, but a lot less people were dying under his watch due to wars.
Well, let's talk about that real quick, because I think that there's something worth digging into here. I want to start with, okay, because I hear this a lot. And I like the plumber line. I think there's some validity to it, right? What am I hiring him for? Let me ask this. Do you think that his personal behavior can impact his policy and his policy effectiveness?
I believe that it can, but I have not seen that it does.
Okay. Can I give you an example?
Oh, I'm sure there are examples out there. Sure. And you can give one. I'm not going to say that it never has in any way, but I would say that in general, his policy has been better than any president in my lifetime. And so his personal failings are something that they bother me, but most of those failings personally were in the past. Prior to his since 2016,
well,
his behavior, his rhetoric's been a little bad, but overall, I haven't seen too much that's been that crazy.
This is a version of Donald Trump says mean things, but like, come on, do we really want Joe Biden? Would you rather have the left being crazy, or would you rather have you know, somebody who says mean words?
More like, I'd rather have mean tweets, a booming economy, and no wars than wars, a stagnant economy, and nice people saying nice things online. You know, okay. And so let me tweet crazy stuff sometimes.
Let me just observe here that I think that anybody on the right who actually follows Milton Friedman's economic policy could do just as well as Donald Trump. This is not a unique to Donald Trump. I need to figure out how to do this.
Oh, I agree. That's why I was a Ron DeSantis guy. My whole support of Ron DeSantis was we get all the good policy of Trump without any of the baggage.
Without any of the Donald Trump. Now, by the way, I think that Donald Trump has on his own, on the economy, led to all sorts of things that we are not willing to give credit for because it pushes things down the road. So just very briefly, when you are the least free trade president in living memory, I'm not going to call you an economic success.
Ooh, and but see, I'm not going to agree there, because I think free trade as a policy is a stupider policy than strategic trade.
And that's fantastic. And what I'm telling you is
I'm a believer not in free trade, but in strategic trade. And I think Trump exercised strategic trade to the benefit of American of American citizens who are the people who ultimately hired him. I believe it reduces overall global GDP when you do that, but I think that it results in a distribution of wealth for American citizens that is better for those citizens.
I'm actually very open to that argument. Here's my issue. I don't think that's why he did it. He did it because he wanted producers to be on his side domestically. He wanted to be able to go to US Steel and say, we're going to bring back these jobs. No one thinks steel jobs are coming back to the US. He is lying for political purposes. And by the way, there's a very easy test. Did he turn people's opinion from free trade is good in most cases? Or did he turn the opinion from to we need to be really selective about free trade because it's more complex than that? I'm totally open to that second one. That's not what he says. He is America first. We have a political
but I would say the strategy, the strategic interest of our trade policy, what drives the strategy? In my mind, the strategy should be you're an American citizen voting for an American president to represent your interests on the global stage. Of course, his trade policy should be America first.
No. You're missing it. You're missing it. Here's the key.
Not America only, but America first.
No. You're missing it. Does he represent American producers or American consumers?
You have
free trade benefits.
You have to be a producer before you can be a consumer. If you don't have the job to make the money, you're kept out of the consumer market altogether.
I can agree with that. That's ammo from my side. I'm good with that.
American economic success, this is a whole debate we could have about economics. American economic success largely became because of our own very tariff-oriented, strategic sort of harboring our industries, protecting them during American history. We did not have a openly free trade policy until kind of post 1950s. And that was when the jobs began to be shipped overseas. And yes, products became less expensive, but we also began to run into economic or wage flattening for the lower classes. So for people in the upper classes, things got cheaper and they made more money. And for the workers, they now had to compete more internationally with the large scale labor markets.
Okay, so let's be really clear here. If only there were a science that investigated, is this better or is this worse? And then we could figure out which one works better. Well, here's what's crazy. Let me tell you about economics. And here's what's really fun. I think that Donald Trump.
I was one credit away from a finance degree. I've run businesses, and I understand. I am a huge fan of Thomas Sowell and Friedman, all those guys.
So then, how can you go to Donald Trump and say he has turned a free trade consensus into a populist mess of no, we're going to prioritize American producers when they are being inefficient? This isn't meritocracy. This is rewarding people who vote for you. And everybody knows
what it is, and this is how I would argue it quite plainly. It depends on the metric that you use as your success metric for economics. Most economists just sort of assume that the metric of success in economics is total GDP output. That if the GDP goes up, then that's good, without any understanding of what without any accounting for the distribution of that GDP.
I don't know, man. You're sounding kind of leftist right now.
I would say no, but
Gini coefficient. When's that coming in?
No. I actually hold to that to a certain extent. I think I'm not as far that way, because I still believe that what will result is it is true that the total economic output will be higher in a truly free trade situation. The problem is that the distribution of that wealth will be distributed largely higher into the socioeconomic status than it will to the working class. In the United States, when the workers, how do I explain it? What essentially happens is that the working class have to compete internationally with the working class internationally. Okay. And there just are people in China and in other nations that will do the work for a lot cheaper. And so what that does is it makes it much harder on the American workers. The American president, when they are judging the economic policies that they want to put in place, they have to take into account not just total GDP output, but what does the GDP, where is the money going to flow in the economy based on this trade agreement? What if, like, for instance, what if a trade agreement that you put together would increase the overall GDP of the nation, but it would only flow to the top 10%? Now, then do this. Say that your same economic policy, if you did it differently, would produce a slightly less GDP, but it would result in the lower class being raised up by, I don't know, 30%, right?
Okay.
So yes, if you're just judging by total GDP, the trade policy that was best for a certain part of America was the second one. But if you're looking at all of America and you're saying what's best for us as a whole, you may be faced with a situation where you have to make a choice between, and you might say, well, the economic policy reduced, higher GDP, go with option one. But he may say, I'm America first, and I need to look at the overall what's beneficial for the nation. And so my trade policy is going to try and protect certain industries from and yes, they may be less efficient. They produce a lower GDP, but it results in more people being able to provide for themselves.
Okay, let me rant for a minute because I've got a couple stored up here, and I've got to get them all out.
We could go deep down the economic.
Oh, I'm excited. I think this will be great. All right, and by the way, I still haven't gotten to the LDS connection, which I think is the important one. I need to come back to that. Good. But let me start with if you were a mercantilist, you should in fact vote for Donald Trump. I have no qualms there. If you think that the way that we become great is by only limiting our supply and not letting, that's fine. I can see that.
I say strategic trade with America.
No. That's fine. That's fine. I am totally fine with that. There is an economic philosophy that says that we need to do what is best for our producers, and that will make us rich. That is called mercantilism. We already have that philosophy.
Well, I am
totally fine with
it. I think you have to balance the interest of consumers and producers.
I agree. If only there were a science who had like little charts where you could figure out what is the best balance between Look. Let me make clear how silly what you are saying is. You are making Donald Trump sound like he is a social justice warrior of the left who is concerned about the downtrodden. No, he is not. He cares about appealing to business and lobbying groups.
I would be very, very careful about assuming motives here. I don't look at the motives. I look at the policies. He can have whatever motive he wants. But the certain protection of certain industries from foreign competition does protect certain American workers from certain threats to their livelihood.
It absolutely does. And on that basis, we should really start putting prescriptions against businesses inventing word processors, because those typewriter salesmen are going to go out of business. Have you ever thought about those typewriter salesmen? Jacob, have you no soul? I mean,
I believe me, this is the trouble with the economic one. And I want to move past this because we could literally argue all day.
Can I finish?
I will grant this. It is hard it isn't simple in my opinion, because you do have to recognize that there's going to be disruptions in markets, and inefficient businesses should go out of business. And I do tend to agree with that, but there is a point at which it's hard to decide how much disruption you want to have. If all of the truckers tomorrow, like people are talking about this, if tomorrow, like what's happened economically in history is that these changes have happened fairly slowly over time. The problem is if you have a massive disruption in the market, like electric trucks that no longer need truck drivers, and that takes off, that's the number one employer of high school educated men. Mm-hmm. And you're going to put them out of work. Let's say that like literally in the next year, all the trucks convert. You're going to have a major problem. To quote Joe Biden, It's the one
I
quote
like
that
the
I
side
love
you're
from the
taking here.
guy.
This is good. Keep going.
The one quote from the guy that I actually loved is he said, my dad said, he said, Joey, it's not a job, it's your dignity. And I think that that's true to a certain extent. When you're just dealing with the dollars and cents, you also forget what happens to that guy who has a livelihood and his family and all that. And all of a sudden he is now out of work and now in a market flooded with a bunch of other guys who are just like him.
Okay. So I do want to move past this, but I have to get my rant in. I still have not
Yeah,
finished.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Yet.
Get it in.
Let me
We'll
rant for just
move
a
on.
second. Okay. I'm going to say something that sounds a little bit harsh, but it's the right kind of harsh. And it's the kind of harsh that I think a lot of people actually like Donald Trump for. And that is, if you're an American citizen, you have the benefits of being an American citizen. You have English as your native tongue. You have one of the best economies in the entire world. I am going to go out on a limb and say meritocracy is better than this weird populism that says, no, America first. No, merit first. And if you can produce something better, then you should be the one that is able to produce. And by the way, I don't disagree with it's about their dignity. If we have AI taking over cars, let's do that thoughtfully and carefully. Be aware of what's coming. But neither you nor I would be in a position to say, no, we need to prevent cars from taking those trucking jobs for 150 years. What I'm trying to say here is I'm totally fine with, let's slow roll it. Let's be careful. You have to decide, do you think Donald Trump is doing this because he is thoughtful and deliberate? Or do you think he is doing this because very large businesses are willing to lobby him and get support for his candidacy because they know that the easiest way, if you can't compete, then the sucker's way into making a lot of money is to get quotas and tariffs and any kind of government protectionism that you can. That's the better way. Wait 1 second, getting interrupted. That if you can't do it that way, the second place way is to get government benefits that protect you. Now, let me dive into one other thing just really quick.
Okay.
If I can figure out how to share my screen on this thing here. Okay,
Yeah,
which screen am I? Oh, here we go. When we talk about Donald Trump, we also have to talk about the economy in this regard. For a libertarian or a small government Republican to say that Donald Trump is somehow the messiah for free market economics, he is no different from any Republican or Democrat, probably a little worse, frankly, than anybody in the last 50 years. He was strongly in favor of paying people free checks during the pandemic because he thought that was going to help him. I just don't buy when people say, well, his policies are good. I'm sorry, which policies exactly are we talking about?
Well, could I answer that to a certain extent? I mean, we're talking about
how do I share my screen here?
Oh, I actually had it up. The graph you're looking at there?
Yeah. No, I just want to make sure that you and I are talking to each other now. Go ahead.
Yeah. So, I would say when it comes to economic policies, so lower taxes. I mean, you got to be in favor of that as a libertarian guy, right?
Sure.
So, decrease in regulations.
Yeah,
I mean,
awesome.
He deregulated things.
The kind of stuff that any decent Republican would do. Am I right?
What decent Republicans have we had in my lifetime then, you know?
So maybe we need to do something about that, right? Like maybe that's the issue.
Well, let's go to the next policy. Let's talk about.
Hold on, because I never got to the LDS. Well, maybe we should wait. You keep going through yours and I'll get to mine.
Well, and then I would also, so lower taxes, a deregulation, the unleashing of the energy industry. These are all policies that are, from just an economics perspective, you and I both agree with a knowledge of economics, that unleashes production.
And I'll go further. Joe Biden doesn't know what makes an economy run. He thinks that if we could unionize all of the United States of America, that everybody's wages would go up. He doesn't understand. And by the way, if you ever want to try something fun, wait until people on the left are ranting about the science and what the science will say. It could be climate science or vaccines. By the way, I'm big on vaccines. I know that that's a disagreement with me and the broader right, but just wait until somebody's ranting about the science and say, "Oh, tell me about economic science. How does that minimum wage work out?"
Yeah.
Tell me, and the lack of understanding and the frustration towards economists. And by the way, they're very smart left-leaning economists.
Oh, I'm a huge, I love economics. I think it's brilliant. I think where I get into my disagreement isn't with the economics per se, but it has to do with some of the prioritization of what metrics are success and what aren't. Now, from a Latter-day Saint perspective, as we're talking about economics, in my mind, this comes back to our duty to the poor, because a good economic system helps get people out of poverty. You and I would both agree.
Absolutely.
The greatest anti-poverty, quote unquote, program of the past 1,000 years has been free markets. Essentially, which is really funny. They talk about like capitalism. I love what Thomas Sowell says about that. He says, he's like, capitalism isn't an ism. It's just like what happens when you stop stealing from each other and you just,
it's literally just economic freedom.
Don't steal. If you don't steal from people, if you don't take things without their consent, you just let people voluntarily figure it out.
Private property, basic human rights, courts, and a little bit of prosecution and police. And all of a sudden magic happens. Joe Biden does not understand this. The left broadly does not understand this.
Agreed. I think the people that suffer are the poor.
Agreed completely.
Poverty and that with their policies, which again, if I go back real quickly here to this thing, the poor, I can't help but feel like the economic policies of Donald Trump are better in practice for the poor. And so one of the reasons that I support Donald Trump as a Latter-day Saint, again, my concern isn't with his intentions. My concern is, does he help the poor? And his policies, when I compare them to Joe Biden's, they just demonstrably help the poor more than the policies of Joe Biden. Joe Biden's policies are bad. So,
well, and let me jump in on that, because this is an area where I think we agree. I'm planning to share this episode on my Facebook wall, and I'm sure that some of my left-leaning friends will be agog and aghast when they hear me say this. But I need to say this really clearly, and I think you actually said it really well. There's a difference between feeling good and doing good. Most welfare policies make people feel good. And the best example of this is debt relief for college students. Who it ends up serving is people like me. It is going directly into the coffers of very wealthy universities. It is literally subsidizing the problem instead of actually caring for the poor. If you want to care for the poor, you give opportunity. You mostly get out of the way.
Is that even constitutional? Like,
I mean, I'm not a lawyer. I run away from legal questions because that's a whole.
I can tell everyone right now. You can go read the Constitution. There's nothing in the Constitution that says that the President of the United States can just waive the debt of college students. And I don't say waive the debt. What he actually is doing, he's transferring the debt. You can't get rid of debt. All you can do is transfer it to someone else. So you know who he's transferring it to? He's transferring it to the plumbers that my dad employs. My dad's a plumbing contractor.
And by the way, one of the greatest examples of the left thinking they are doing right when they are hurting people is every time you are doing college debt relief, you are screwing over anybody who didn't go to college. And instead of making a world in which we don't need college to be successful and to have a decent job, we have said, let's make college this cool thing where if you don't go, you're locked out of a decent job. And you never get access to that second tier of really, really high quality jobs. And you're just kind of hosed in life. I'm sorry, but the left,
unless you have certain policies that protect the people with the high school diplomas from international competition.
Ooh, interesting.
And allow for national industry. No.
You brought it up. You brought it up. You got to let me rebut.
You can respond to it, but I won't respond to you. Just I know we'll get sucked into that rabbit hole.
Do you think that protectionism benefits the very poorest, or do you think that it actually benefits the most well-connected politically?
I don't. Just so you real quick, I'm not in favor. Protectionism and free trade, I think, are just stupid terms because they don't convey what actually needs to happen. I'm in favor of what I call strategic trade based on national interest.
Okay. I'm happy to concede the point on nomenclature. Call it as you will. Do you think special protective benefits from the government actually end up benefiting the poor, or do you think they actually end up benefiting the politically well-connected?
Depends on the policy.
I don't think so. I think overwhelmingly, the reason why colleges enjoy so much welfare is because colleges are on the side of the angels, can do no wrong. And by the way, did you notice how many college presidents have ins with all of these politicians? Isn't that so weird?
Donald Trump talk about the college industry. I don't. Well,
Donald Trump is not out here trying to care about poor people.
We need to have a separate discussion on economics, just specifically.
Let's do it. All right.
Let's get back to the broader one, just because we literally will be here all day talking economics. But I want to bring people back, though, that the reason I think both of us care about economics
It actually does the most good for people.
Rich.
Yes. Yes.
It's because that is what actually helps the poor. Okay. So another one that is hugely important to Latter-day Saints is the subject of sort of the cultural battles around the family. Okay. So I'm not going to say that either president is super gung-ho, like oppose gay marriage, kind of stuff. Like that's just not happening. But if you were to ask, do you really think that who is more on the side of sort of the LGBTQIA plus agenda? Who do they support in this election? Do they support Trump or do they support Biden? I think most people would conclude that Biden is the bigger sort of cultural force that enables and empowers those. I mean, the guy appoints people that are obvious sort of radicals in this regard, with the transgender transgender kids with children stuff. Trump tends to be softer on it, but I have to admit, if I have to choose between the two, I can't help but look at the family and say Trump is someone who, though his personal life has been a mess in the past, on a policy level is more likely to be more on our side than Joe Biden is. To put
I'll give you my read. And by the way, this is one of the most important things to me, both economically and for other reasons. I think that the family is actually one of the greatest inventions if you care about how people do in the long term economically, for example.
Oh, 100%.
I would argue that Joe Biden is probably an older guy who cares about being inclusive and loving his neighbor and isn't super paying attention to some of the nominations that his administration is going to put forward. And Donald Trump is more than happy to be on whatever side is going to get him elected. Okay. And that makes it hard for me. Like, I hear you, and I see that there is a calculus there where Donald Trump is maybe going to advance my policy goals more. I don't think he's doing it for the right reason, and that's where I have to tap out.
So as we go into religious liberty, that's another one that I think for Latter-day Saints is very important. I mean, you have Obamacare with the Little Sisters of the Poor,
Oh yeah, I was an intern during Obamacare. I remember that fight. And I was just absolutely aghast, not just at the bad policy, but at the way in which they were willing to say, and if you don't like it, too bad. And it was a huge, enormous problem.
Yeah. So I look at, again, with Joe Biden, and I'm making the comparison between the two, and who here has the stronger position on religious liberty. I mean, his vice president, Kamala Harris, implied that because somebody was involved in the Knights of Columbus, that they shouldn't be like qualified to be a president, or she implied something along those lines. I can't remember the exact thing. And it's like, whoa, that's,
and I think it is entirely
Catholicism, which is ironic because
entirely fair to say
Biden is a Catholic.
The left generally has an aversion to religion and a misunderstanding of what it means to be religious. That's the left generally. That's not all left-leaning people. I think Joe Biden really means it in some sense when he says he's a Catholic. I don't think that's all politics. I'm not going to judge where that starts and ends. By the way,
even can you say that you're a Catholic when you openly support not only just abortion in some cases, but like actively look to promote? You want to codify Roe v. Wade in law?
Can you say you're a Christian when you say 2 Corinthians? Are we trying to compare between Joe Biden and Donald Trump? I mean, look, call it a wash. I'm fine with that.
Oh, fine. At best, we'll call it a wash. But
yeah,
I wouldn't say that. Like, I think Joe Biden's Catholicism is as deep as, let's say Donald Trump's marital fidelity pre-2010.
Let me give my perspective on this very briefly. And I'm only nervous because I see how much time is ticking, and there are a couple of points I want to make, but maybe I'll make them at the end if that's okay.
Fine. I'm fine to go 90 minutes. We can even go further than that if we need to.
Okay. One of the things that I want to make sure that I hit really clearly is I feel like this is a worthwhile thing to mention briefly. We do not make rational decisions, and I don't mean you, and I don't mean me. I mean human beings don't make rational decisions. What we do is we make emotional decisions, and then we justify them in a post hoc fashion, right? This is Jonathan Haidt. This is psychology.
Elephant in the writer.
That's exactly right. And so what tends to happen is we say my religion informs my politics, but what's really going on is I pick my politics and I squeeze it into my religion. And I think that's a really important way to look at a lot of what's going on here. And so as I think about Donald Trump, as I think about a lot of this other stuff, engaging the writer can be really helpful, where we step back and say, okay, pause for a second. Is this really what I think it is? I think Donald Trump is associated with a right-wing conservatism that is trying to fight a culture war that he doesn't actually care about. He has been pretty pro-LGBTQ, frankly, personally, and like it just doesn't seem like it's an issue for him.
But I would again, for me, as I look at that, I don't really like. Maybe he has the worst intentions in the world, but it's like if you have bad intentions and you give all the right policy, and my choice is with the guy who has the wrong intentions and the wrong policy, like to me, and that's kind of why, again, as I look at this, I go, okay, he's winning on abortion. He's winning on wars. He's winning on taking care of the poor. He's winning on matters of the family. He's winning on religious liberty. I mean,
but here's what I was talking about. This is exactly what I was meaning. So show your chart again.
Yeah.
Okay. Tone and rhetoric. Donald Trump is a dumpster fire. Abortion. Donald Trump did something that any other Republican would have done. We have a disagreement about wars because, as it turns out,
I'll put it back on there.
No, that's okay. I think we have a disagreement about wars. I completely concede the point on the poor. I think that the family and religious liberty are at best awash. Then you've got racial discrimination. Yeah, I think
here's my thing. Racial discrimination is the point I want to bring up in relation to that. Joe Biden actively discriminated against every white person that wanted to be vice president, and chose his vice president explicitly on the basis of her skin color. Okay.
Oh yeah, but it goes
that's
further.
Wrong. That's immoral. In fact, I think that's illegal. I think that he should, like, you're not allowed to discriminate against people because they don't have a certain skin color.
Given that I am also big on intent, let me be clear about two things. Number one, I don't think it's actually that hard to find really, really qualified Black women to be on the court, and making it into a political promise felt really gross to me.
Yeah.
Right. Sorry, I said Supreme Court. We were talking about
disgusting, and also you're talking about meritocracy. I mean, it's like saying I'm only going to choose someone with green eyes.
Well, like, now here's the thing.
What are you talking about? Skin color does not matter. And we as Latter-day Saints, if we're going to root out racism, we shouldn't be voting for a president who's literally out there choosing his vice president on the basis of her skin color.
Well, now I want to push just a little bit here. I think we mostly agree. So let me be clear on that. I also think that, like, there are qualified people, and I would love to see more of them. Like Clarence Thomas being appointed to the Supreme Court, not a bad thing. Being deliberate about, like, hey, can we make sure we're including people from different walks of life, does not bother me. That is not the end of the world. What bothers me is that it was for the purpose of politics. What bothers me is that Joe Biden said, if you elect me, then I will do what you want. Here is the quid pro quo. Here's how we're going to do. You reward me, I reward you. I give you what you want. And I'm just not a big fan of those politics, if you get what I'm saying. I think but let's go broader. I think that the racial tension that was in this country at the end of the Obama presidency and through to the beginning of the next few years has largely gone away. And I think that's not actually, maybe I'm totally wrong. I'm a white guy.
And you want to know why it's gone away?
Well, I mean, look, I'm not saying it's wrong.
Because the Democrat Party will utilize racial tension whenever it is advantageous to their political aspirations. And so
I agree.
It isn't an irony that it was an election year when the whole George Floyd thing came about.
But let me also be clear. So I was in Baltimore at the time. So I'm in Baltimore and we're at lunch, and one of my colleagues says, "Well, Donald Trump is just a racist." And I think it bothered me in two ways. First, it's just like the pure accuracy of it. Like, I don't think he actually is like just a pure racist. Like, I don't see any evidence of that. And so I said, nah, I don't think that's quite right. But then there was a second thing. It was like something was like wiggling around in the back of my head. And she was like, how dare you? How can you believe that he's not a racist? And my answer was one that I'll still hold to today. I think that what he is somebody who's willing to exploit race for political purposes. And that is exactly what we are just starting to get away from on the left. And I am not comfortable embracing on the right. We have never done that before. and the degree to which Donald Trump, by the way, I fully agree with what you're saying about the left. There is some racial politicking that I find to be disastrous and gross.
Well, I mean, surely they use race for political purposes. I would almost say that Donald Trump's, if he does use race for political purposes, he's doing it as a response to the left doing the same thing. It's kind of like, well, everybody seems to care about the race issue, so, and is taking into account skin color. So I guess I have to. It's kind of like you said, right? You might want to say, well, you know, race isn't a factor, but we would like to show that we include everyone. Well, actually, if you want to be a pure, like you say, meritocracy guy, you don't care about skin color. You throw that criteria totally out, because to do so in any way, to give anyone favored status based on skin color, is to discriminate against someone else. And so therefore, it should not be relevant in any way. But Donald Trump, I think, looks at the situation and I think rightly realizes that race, people say race shouldn't matter, but it seems to matter to everyone. So I'm going to talk about it or address the issue and say, you know, hey, look, here's our Latinos for Trump and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, I do think he is obviously, to win political elections, you have to try and appeal to what the people are, what's important to them. And apparently skin color does matter to a lot of Americans, to our great shame.
Well, and so let me just say this. I think what you have made a very effective case that Donald Trump is now engaging in what Joe Biden had been doing, and the right is becoming more like the left. And I'm trying to say, no, stop it. I don't want that here. I don't want political resentment. I don't want race-based resentment. I don't want any of that garbage. When Donald Trump stands up in meetings and starts in big rallies and starts talking about, you know, look, I have my own personal views on affirmative action. I think it's mostly really bad and stupid. I also think that pretending like white people have it really rough today, like, I'm sorry, but that's going to be one that I'm going to hit a hard path.
Is there some racial statement that Donald Trump has made that's such a classic example of him playing the race card?
I think that Donald Trump is willing to. So if you're asking for a specific citation, one doesn't pop to mind. I'm happy to look for one later. I think Donald Trump is more than happy to exploit resentment for political purposes in a way that we used to not do that on the right. Now, by the way, that's me being ignorant. From what I gather, the right has always had a dark side and the left has always had a dark side. So when I was growing up, like, I really thought that Ronald Reagan was just like a good, decent guy, and that our racial resentment politics were not there. I did not see them. Maybe I'm just juvenile and innocent and I didn't get it, but like, I don't want it to be a part of our discourse and dialogue. I like some aspects of populism. Donald Trump. I mean, look, this goes back to the free trade, which I think
I would to kind of contextualize that, because I don't totally disagree. I think that it's sort of like people are like, well, who do the white supremacists vote for? They vote for Donald Trump. It's sort of like there are people within, it isn't the movement on the right. It's those people actually are bad for us. We really don't like those people because those people make us look bad. The left actually loves those people because they make the right look bad. And so they get all their cameras and immediately go to the most radical, crazy person they can find and have them do that. And I think the right does that as well. I think that's a natural part of politics to a certain extent. But what I would say is I don't think that Trump is the one who, you know, the guy's daughter is married to a Jew. He's super pro-Israel. Like, this guy is like the neo-Nazi. Like, this is just weird, you guys.
Okay, so I totally agree with you, and I think that that's a really important point. The left's crazies make the right look completely sane. Now, let's also, just out of fairness, make sure that we take a second to remember that that goes both ways. And here is my evidence.
Here.
And we both know this. Like,
here we go.
If we start comparing crazies versus crazies, we get stuff like this. Like,
yeah, the Trump cult, you won't have any problem for me with the people that are weirdly obsessed with Donald Trump.
I can't. So, like, your point is right. The left's crazies are crazy, and I completely agree.
Well, but I would say, though, at least the Trump crazies love this country.
Okay, but let's be clear about something here, because I think this is really important. Let's talk about patriotism. Let's add that to your list.
Okay.
Do you want people who say, I am proud of America?
Yeah.
Or do you want people who say, I'm going to be proud of America no matter what America does?
No, I don't think that that is, I wouldn't call that, I don't think blind patriotism exists. I think there's a patriot, as I would understand it, and I'm a big fan of patriotism, is to be proud of the things in your country that are worthy of your being proud of.
Completely
and those
agreed.
things, specifically in our context, even religiously, go down to the founding principles of this nation, which we believe were inspired and that we should try and seek to conserve, which is what I believe conservatism is really about, is sort of conserving those values within our structure, including, which you'll like this as someone who's kind of in the libertarian streak, including the philosophy of liberty, which is meant to be at the core of the American founding. And so I think this is a good segue, though, into this idea of the Constitution, the last one here on my list. Now, for Latter-day Saints, we care about the Constitution on even a religious level as a document that we believe should be protected and preserved and respected. And therefore, one of the great criticisms of Donald Trump is that he is a threat to our democracy and he is a danger to the Constitution. He doesn't care about it. There's this tweet that he put out that people can reference, and I agree. It's a stupid tweet where he was mad about the election and said, hey, when elections are fraudulent, we have to suspend the rules, kind of a martial law almost type thing, even the Constitution if necessary. And I agree. That rhetoric, irresponsible, wrong, bad. But when I look at the two's policies and I ask the question of who respects the Constitution from a policy perspective, that's where there is a very significant difference. Biden used OSHA to force people to get the vaccine or lose their job. Biden uses the Constitution goes end around the Constitution to force people to pay for the student loans of other people. The DOJ under President Biden is labeling parents who oppose this craziness that's going on in the school systems as potential domestic terrorists. Okay? We can look at the recent weaponization of the Justice Department against Donald Trump. It's obvious that these are, again, yes, if we talk rhetoric, I would agree. Joe Biden's rhetoric on the Constitution sounds very nice. But when we compare both of them on the policy level, there is a stark contrast between the two in their use of the Constitution and abuse. And judges, I mean, Trump has promoted the most pro-Constitution, originalist sort of judges who will protect that document of anyone. And Joe Biden wanted to put Merrick Garland on the court. Okay? A political hack from the word go. So when we talk about defending the Constitution, I'm sorry. I look at actions speak louder than words. And while Trump has said some things that I don't like, the actions in actual policy have been very much, Joe Biden has been undermining the Constitution. And that's my rant. I'll let you go.
Okay, here I go. I'm going to share my screen again. This is a tweet that I saw earlier today. Nope, that's the wrong one. So let me try this one more time because I had it up. There it is. Let's see here. Let's see. What's that?
Sorry, I pushed a button when I wasn't supposed to.
No, you're good. Okay, can you see that?
Sorry, here.
This is a Frank Luntz quote, tweet. So this is a Frank Luntz quote. For those of you who don't know, Frank Luntz is a statistician, does a lot of polling and stuff. I woke up to this morning, and I don't think it's unfair to say that it made me pretty emotional. So this has to be the longest standing ovation for anyone or anything I have ever witnessed. 4,000 high school students in Normandy. This is a recollection of what happened on D-Day. And Frank Luntz says American World War II veterans are treated like rock stars when they go to visit Normandy. There are things that make me incredibly proud and about our country. And I think that we have been an enormous source of good in the world. I am one of these people who still tears up at the national anthem, and I feel very, very strongly about that. I want to be abundantly clear that the second that Donald Trump started propagating a narrative that he had been unfairly treated in the election, the rest of the world looked at us in despair, because we have always been a shining city on a hill. We have always been the people that have been saying, no, 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 other countries have problems passing along the reins of government peacefully, but we don't. We get this. This is who we are. So I cannot make an equivalency between Joe Biden's very typical leftist behavior, with which I firmly disagree, the administrative state, the willingness to pack the courts, as bad as all of those things are, and they are bad, and they are seriously bad, to in any way make them equal to Donald Trump's willingness to sow seeds of discontent about a future election. By the way, I'm not talking about January 6th. I'm talking about what he is doing right now. Go on Twitter, go and look at what he and his allies are saying. They are sowing the seeds early so that when he loses, if it is within a margin of anything other than an enormous mandate, he can say it was unfair. It was rigged. It was not fair to him.
I have a quick question about this. Did you feel the same way about Hillary Clinton in 2016 when she was saying that Trump is an illegitimate president and it was basically because of Russian collusion that he was elected and the election was not legitimate?
I am happy to go to that once we both admit that it's whataboutism. Okay,
so one of the things with whataboutism is that there's a degree to which when you have two options and you're trying to choose between the options, you have to say, well, what about these guys? Now, I agree.
Oh, interesting. So is Hillary Clinton on the, is she on the ballot? Did I miss something?
No, but her party is, and Joe Biden is, and Joe Biden is on her team.
Nah, I can't see. And this is why you got to think in approval voting ways.
And if we had the approval voting system, then I'd be on your side, but we don't.
I cannot stomach the idea of voting for a candidate who at this very time is running around saying that a jury that convicted him, by the way, there are problems with that trial, and I'm happy to get into those. But for him to cast doubt on the US justice system, which is, I think, a jewel in the world that has done so much good because he didn't get his way.
That's why I'm so concerned, is because when you see jury trials like O.J. Simpson's, which can be so incredibly influenced by politics, and then we begin to see that same kind of stuff is happening or seemingly to happen in these cases involving Donald Trump, it seems pretty clear that there is something happening in the justice system that's terrifying. Because you're right, it's because I have such respect for our justice system that when I see something like this happen, it terrifies me. Because if it can happen to him, it can happen to any of us.
Oh, it's not happening to me because I didn't sleep with a porn star. But let's get into that real quick. Let's do that. No. Let's do that. Is it just Trump? Is it his 5 different criminal cases? Or is it all? What about Manafort? What about Stone and Bannon? What about Cohen? See, here's the problem is you have to step back and look at the whole big picture and go, oh, crap. This isn't because he's getting picked on. It's because he doesn't have a good relationship with the truth. And this has been who he was.
Why did all of this happen? Why didn't he get in any legal trouble in his past?
He just didn't get in any legal trouble in his past? Are you joking?
When was he ever convicted of these kind of crimes? Did he have these kind of laws or these kind of cases brought against him before when he was a TV star on the left?
I'm gonna let you study that one, because like squeaky clean the man is not.
No, I mean, any business owner is going to have those. And second of all, when he slept with a porn star and he paid hush money, that's not illegal, even if it's immoral.
Okay, so this is the point that I've been hoping to get at.
Counter, by the way, which happened almost 20 years ago. And I agree. I don't apologize for the guy. But what I'm saying is that at the end of the day, it seems very clear that what the standard that he's being held to isn't being held to other people. It's very
and if that is the case, but let's talk about the court case
precedent for these sorts of things that they're doing against Donald Trump, like his case where he got fined. What was it, like $300 million for something that, like, there's no precedent for this. One of the things about legal theory is that you have precedent. One of the ways that you can tell if a law is being abused is if it's never been used in that way in the past. And that's why Trump will very likely win this on appeal.
And I'm good with that. That's
once
fine.
You get it out of the politicized courts of New York.
So then great news. Then what we do is, if we're Donald Trump, we say we are not worried about this because we believe in our justice system. So we're going to wait on appeal. And instead, that's not what he is doing. No. Hold on.
It's perfectly fair to say that the courts in that area were very clearly rigged against him.
I have no. Okay, so let me go back to something that you said earlier, and it may feel like I'm changing topics, but I'm not. And I want to come back to this. Let's talk about real quick what it looks like when personal problems become public policy problems. So this is a tweet by Richard Hananiah. Journalist, would you declassify the 9/11 files? Trump, yeah. Journalist, JFK files, yep. Journalist, what about the Epstein files? Yep. Well, less so. You don't want to affect people's lives if there's phony stuff in there. You know, there's a lot of phony stuff in those Epstein files. Gee, I wonder who he's thinking of. I'm gonna be real blunt here.
Fine, if he's involved with Epstein or something, and hey, if he's involved with that, I want him prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
But this is my issue. Personal problems become public problems. The fact that he is now currently, look, it was going to be an unprecedented trial because he's a former president on a criminal trial. There's no way it's not going to be weird.
So let me real quick. You brought up something with the election in January 6th. Obviously, is a huge issue for people. Okay.
Yeah.
In fact, for a lot of people, it's like the issue. Okay.
Yep.
So I want to really quickly just pull up because well, first of all, let me start with this. January 6th was an ugly, stupid riot that I think is disgusting and it's wrong and it's an embarrassment. And any Republican that doesn't feel otherwise is an idiot because it's the #1 issue that is like pushing people. I remember when it happened thinking, are you kidding me? This is going to be thrown at us. The thing is, the left can riot for the entire year of 2020, burn cities and businesses and kill people. And you know, you get COVID exceptions if you're protesting, but not a COVID exception if you want to go to church. And all of this kind of insanity that happened with all the George Floyd riots. And then the Republicans have one day where some of them get out of hand at the Capitol and do some really stupid things that were wrong. But then it's like Donald Trump did this.
Okay.
And
okay,
I just want to.
Go ahead and finish. I don't want to interrupt you, but let me get in when you're done.
Let me finish sort of the presentation on this because it may not be your opinion, but it's the opinion of a lot of people out there that Donald Trump was behind this. It's all on him. Okay. So very first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to look at what he said on January 6th in that speech. He said, we're going to walk down and when you want, okay, I'm going to kind of jump through this a little bit to the big kind of controversial part. He said, we're going to walk down to the Capitol because you never take back your country with weakness. You have to show strength. You have to be strong. And then he says, we've come to demand that Congress will do the right thing and only count the electors that have been lawfully slated. Lawfully slated. I know that everyone here will soon be marching over to the Capitol building to peacefully and patriotically make your voices heard. That's a weird thing to say for somebody who's trying to start a riot. And then once the riot begins, he says, I'm asking for everyone at the U.S. Capitol to remain peaceful. No violence. Remember, we are the party of law and order. This is his tweet. Respect the law, our great men and women in blue. Thank you. Again, please support our Capitol Police and law enforcement. They are truly on the side of our country. Stay peaceful. These are weird things. Now, obviously, I have no doubt that Trump wanted to create a protest at the Capitol. There's no doubt about that. I think his reasons for that were wrong. I think he was wrong-headed, but he was not inciting people to an insurrection against the government. And if people want to say that his rhetoric was what led to it, then I would like to share what the let's compare that to the rhetoric on the left.
When they go low, we kick. And if you see anybody in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome.
I just don't even know why there aren't uprisings all over the country. Maybe there will be. You cannot be civil with a political party that wants to destroy what you stand for, what you care about.
Get up and please get up in the face of some Congress people.
Is this the quote unquote mob?
So I just can't help but notice an enormous double standard for the people who cry about January 6th, who like Cory Booker are out there talking about, you know, get in the face of some Congress people. And then they want to say that Donald Trump incited an insurrection on January 6th. That's absurd. It's such a double standard. It just drives me nuts. Anyway, go ahead, Ben.
Okay. I said at the beginning that 80% of the case for Donald Trump was just the case against Joe Biden. And I think your listeners can go through and listen to how often it ends up being that the argument has to be how bad the left is. And if you remove that, then all of a sudden you look at a man who is evil and childish. And he's a big, giant man baby who doesn't have the maturity to hold a potato gun, much less hold the reins of the most powerful country in the world. And as soon as you break out of that, now let me be clear. I have for a very long time, I'll give a specific example. I was in Baltimore during the Freddie Gray riots. I had a student texting me. She said, "I'm scared they're right outside my house." Like, this is very real to me. And the people at the time were debating whether we should call it a riot or an uprising, because we don't want to be mean. We don't call it a riot. We need to say that it was a Baltimore uprising. No, people got hurt. People were terrified. The property was destroyed. You think Baltimore was made better because of that? Like, I'm sorry, it just wasn't. So if what you are saying is that what the left is doing is wrong, I completely agree with you. Here's why it's not. Here's why it's an absolute false equivalency, because it wasn't the Capitol and it wasn't a president who was cheering them on. That's the difference. And it's an enormous difference. And you know that. You know that it is an enormous difference. Do I think that Donald Trump secretly plotted in his basement and coordinated every single person? I have no idea. Here's what I do know. Go back to that slide that you had, the first of the three. Why were they going there? What was the purpose of them going there? It was not a peaceful protest.
Why couldn't it have been peaceful?
I don't care about the peaceful part. Let me read exactly what he said. We're going to walk down to the Capitol. We're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women. And we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them, because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength and you have to be strong. We have come to demand that Congress do the right thing and only count the electors who have been lawfully slated. Donald Trump was encouraging a crowd to go to Congress and say, "No, I really won."
People have protests all the time that I disagree with, but that doesn't mean that they're not peaceful protests. He wanted people to have a peaceful protest. My case is that he wanted people to have a peaceful protest for something that I think was stupid and he shouldn't have been protesting. But that's very different from inciting a riot.
He thought he won. He encouraged people to go. I am happy to concede that maybe he was just really, 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 really dumb and not actually evil. That's completely fine. Either way, he cannot get my vote. And yes, that is at the point where I'm going to say, if he is the one giving a speech right before they go down to the Capitol and they end up going into the Capitol during that time, I'm going to go ahead and say, no, that person never gets my vote ever again, bar none, period, end of story.
Okay, so why would you vote for anyone on the left who had
because they didn't do it at the Capitol under the behest of a president?
Well, but they were...
That's exactly why.
The president of the United States currently does not condemn the George Floyd riots and all the things that have happened. Has he come out and been way against all that? George Floyd riots
take place at the U.S. Capitol under the behest of a president who was too big of a man baby to admit that he was going to lose.
Behest? What do you mean?
We are going to go down to the Capitol and we are going to demand that they only count certain electors.
Okay, that's fine.
Yes, the behest.
You can have a really stupid, peaceful protest.
Great. And if he was calling for a
you have a
peaceful protest,
constitutional right to go down there and peacefully protest for stupid things.
Donald Trump thought he won.
I know he didn't.
He didn't.
And he was upset about it. And he wanted Pence to do stupid things. And I agree with all of that. He thought that it was fraudulent. I agree. That is where Donald Trump was wrong. I will agree with you 100%. And everyone who says that that Donald Trump lost the 2020 election, I will concede that all day long. But what I will not concede is that he wanted to go down there and start a riot. That isn't what he wanted. He explicitly said that he wanted them to go down and peacefully protest so that they could make their voices heard. And when the people went down there, they got out of control. He said, hey, knock it off, be peaceful, support the police. And it got out of hand.
Okay, so I'm going to go out on a limb and quote a friend of mine who said, you got to be really careful imputing motive. Handy when that works for you, not so handy when it works against you.
Well,
you just did the same thing. No. You got to own this one. You just did the same thing that I did before. I said, I think Donald Trump is bad. And you said, whoa, careful about motive. You're right. You are now saying, I just think it was just peaceful protest. I am looking at the evidence. He stood up. We have the words of his speech.
We both are imputing motive here.
I'm looking at the evidence of the words of his speech. He says, we're going to go down. We have to do it with
strength. Okay, let's quote the words of his speech. Do you see where it says peacefully?
Because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength and you have to be strong. We have to come to demand.
Are you legitimately saying that if someone says you have to be strong and you can't show weakness, that means that they want to riot, even when they explicitly say right afterwards, do it peacefully?
At a certain point, you have to be willing to connect the dots of.
I think that's where you're imputing motive, and I'm looking at the actual words of his speech. Nothing in his speech incited a riot, and incitement is an actual crime, and you could convict Donald Trump of incitement if you had evidence to do so. And you don't think they do that? They won't, because they can't. They can't convict him because there's no evidence that measures up to the legal level of incitement according to the evidence of what he actually said.
Because we have a system that's built on lots of type 2 errors and not type 1 errors. Donald Trump there is not enough evidence to convict Donald Trump of incitement. There is no way in the world that I would let him date my daughter. And there is no
a lot of plumbers out there that I'd hire that I would never let date my daughter.
But there's also, and here's the key. I'm not going to hire him for any other jobs either. Because whether he was just phenomenally stupid that day or whether he was actually a bad guy, let's take motive out of it.
Oh, wait, why would it be so? I mean, I think that I agree that he, like Hillary Clinton, had this is rigged. This wasn't right. And I think, though, that there's more reason that he had than Hillary Clinton had to think that there was problems with the election. Everybody, it's pretty common, by the way, for people in close elections to say it was rigged. We had the whole hanging Chads
Hillary did
thing.
It. Yep.
Hillary did it. Okay, this is not something new. Okay, now Donald Trump went even farther, but I think you can show that there was collusion happening. In fact, I think Time Magazine did a whole article on it, but it wasn't actual like fake ballot harvesting, type stuff. What it was or fake ballot harvesting may have actually happened because they had the mail-in ballot situation, which was a big deal, I think, and altered some of the rules. You also have the bearing of the Hunter Biden story, which was totally just a deep state operation because they hated Donald Trump from the word go, saying it was Russian information. These people, it was obviously Russian. It's not. It was totally legit the whole time. You had social media companies suppressing it. So there is a sense in which it was rigged. It just wasn't rigged in the way that maybe Donald Trump thought. But you can see why he would be upset. Now, I think what he did, I think this was a stupid protest. I don't think they should have done it. I think that at that point, you just concede the election. It's over. He thought otherwise. He went and tried to lead a peaceful protest according to his own language. And the people decided that they were upset enough that they were going to go and do stuff. And did his rhetoric sort of make those people really riled up? Okay. But I'll say
the issue. Yeah.
Okay. But do you hold that same standard for everybody else who uses way more inflammatory rhetoric than Trump? Like all the people on the left, like Cory Booker, who was running for president and who get in the face of Congress people, you know,
I am happy to condemn the left when they go too far, as they have. I am happy to play the game of whataboutism because I have a clear conscience. I thought it was wrong when Hillary Clinton complained in the year 2000,
and that's
that Al
fine.
Gore was
But
losing.
my point is that it's a team sport, and ultimately, what we have is we have a president whose policies, as I kind of had pointed out here, whose policies on abortion, wars, the poor, family, religious liberty, racial discrimination, the Constitution, I think he wins hands down on all of those issues when compared to the realistic alternative. So my alternatives are I can do a protest vote, or which will allow for the left to move forward, to move the ball down the field, or I can say, no, I think myself and others should fight back against the left by supporting a candidate whose policies will move things in a direction that is positive for the country, because the consequences are super dire for people that don't do that. And my last point, and then I'll let you kind of finish, and I think we'll kind of wrap it up on some of this stuff, is actually a statement from Joseph Smith. And it goes back to this sort of point that I have about feeling good versus doing good. Okay. Joseph Smith said, I love that man better who swears a stream as long as my arm, yet deals justice to his neighbors and mercifully deals his substance to the poor, than the long, smooth-faced hypocrite. And as I think about that quote, I can't help but think, look, Donald Trump's rhetoric is ugly. You go back pre-2010 or pre-2015, yeah, I'm not going to defend the guy's sexual history, but his policies, which is what I'm hiring him for, are better for the poor. They deal more justly with others, more mercifully, and they actually work, and they move the country in a positive direction. And I'm not willing to support someone or do a protest vote that I think will lead to real people being hurt. Donald Trump is not he's not my savior. He's a politician, and politics is a dirty, ugly, stupid game. And I'm hiring him to do a job to help move the ball down the field in the right direction, because if I don't, then the other guy will get hired and he will hurt people. And that's sort of my thing. It's pragmatic, it's utilitarian, to go back to what we talked about before. And that's why I think that members of the church should vote for Donald Trump.
Well, I appreciate that you've given me the time to rant. I don't normally for obvious reasons, I don't get into this in my classes with my students. And I think it's been cathartic for me to get all of this off of my chest. Let me find let me actually start with something that a friend of mine said. It's a quote by President Oaks that I think is really, really important here. Quote, "We encourage our members to refrain from judging one another in political matters. We should never assert that a faithful Latter-day Saint cannot belong to a particular party or vote for a particular candidate. We teach correct principles and leave our members to choose how to prioritize and apply those principles on the issues presented from time to time." Close quote. I really, really want to emphasize, I know that there are good people who are voting for Donald Trump. I sure hope I've been persuasive. I will talk to anybody about this because I think it matters. I think there are things that matter more: family and community and your kids and being a decent neighbor. But at the end of the day, I think this one actually does matter. I think that your vote doesn't actually matter as much as people think. And I'll hold to that. I don't think people are going to die because of how I vote. I think I think it's going to be a lot more meaningful about what I talk about, what I focus on. Let me hit one other thought. We've talked a little bit about utilitarianism versus deontology. And I'm gonna just mention really quickly my deontology take. In other words, I have a rule, right? We have some rules in our faith. We have some rules about sex and chastity. We have some rules about drinking alcohol and tea and tobacco. We just kind of say, no, we're not going to do that. We just don't do certain things. And so here's my deontology. Now I have it. Let me just start by saying, I'm not talking about how other Latter-day Saints should vote. I'm talking about why this Latter-day Saint is voting the way that he is. This is me speaking for myself. I hope that it's useful for you too. So merely voting a straight ticket or voting based on tradition without careful study of the candidates and their positions on important issues is a threat to democracy and inconsistent with revealed standards, the letter states, citing Doctrine and Covenants 98:10. The other piece, where did it go? Let's just Control F for integrity. The letter encourages members to study candidates carefully and to vote for those demonstrating integrity, compassion, and service to others, regardless of party affiliation. And now if we go to Doctrine and Covenants 98:10, here's what Doctrine and Covenants 98:10 says. Wherefore, honest men, that's number 1, and wise men, that's number 2, should be sought for diligently, and good men and wise men should ye observe to uphold. Otherwise, whatsoever is less than these cometh of evil. If you can make the case that Donald Trump checks those 3 boxes without some kind of an appeal to how bad Biden is or the left is evil, I will happily concede. And I will revise my opinion, and I will consider voting for the man. I will engage in all the trolley problems in the world. We will play utilitarian ethics for as long as you would like. But my frank opinion is that people who I sustain as prophets have asked me to look for men who are honest, good, and wise, and who show integrity and compassion. That rules out Donald Trump. And that's why I can't vote for him, period, and end of story. I don't blame others if they see it differently. That's fine. But the people that I sustain as prophets today have told me that. That ends the conversation for me.
Sounds good. Well, thank you so much, Ben, for coming on and doing this with me. It's been fun.
Fun. Thanks for letting me yell and rant. That's been good.
No, it's all good. I think we'll need to do another time on just economics, just generally, and figure a way to hash that out.
Well,
I think
we also, the one that I care a lot about is international affairs and war. We never got into that as much as I'd hoped to, Ukraine and other stuff. So maybe that's another one we can talk about, but another time.
Perfect. Well, thank you again for coming on, and I'll try and get this episode out pretty soon. Everyone else, where can they find you online if they want to hear things?
I'm always ranting on Twitter. I do a little bit of writing. I'm trying to think, where am I online these days? Probably Twitter is the best place. That's where I rant the most.
Sounds good. Well, I enjoy interacting with you, even though sometimes we butt heads. It's been a fun conversation, and I will catch you next time.
Sounds great. It's been a pleasure, my friend.
Take care. Hey guys, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that subscribe button so my future videos show up on your feed. Also, if you or someone that you know has benefited from the content here on Thoughtful Faith, please consider becoming a channel donor or volunteer by visiting my new website, thoughtfulfaith.org, and clicking on the Get Involved page.